When I was a kid, I'm about to tell you an Uncle Joe story. By the way, sit back, kids. Let me tell you a story about the good old days. So when I was a kid, we had this huge cornfield behind our house. Southwest Michigan, you'd often in the summer have the sky full of these little scattered clouds. And after they pushed across Lake Michigan shoreline, they'd then come near Kalamazoo, where I grew up, and all kinds of little clouds. And my brother and I, we'd entertain ourselves on those days that Mom would tell us we weren't allowed back in the house by playing this one little simple game. As the shadows of the next cloud would come toward us, you could see it coming from half a mile away. You'd see this slow movement of the shadow coming across the cornfield. And our goal was to go as far out into the yard as we could, and then as we saw the shadow come, run back and hide behind something so that the shadow wouldn't get us. And today, sadly for people on the East Coast, and it's not a game, the shadow called Florence is here. Live from the 3-room apartment above Uncle Jack's garage while the basement's being renovated. Hey there, Stackers. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And today, our not-so close friend Florence, I don't think we call Florence a friend, has come ashore. We're going to talk about Florence today. We're also going to talk about long-term care. And at the end of the show, we put those together into a big idea that you take home. And that's the whole show called Money in the Morning. Thanks to Lemonade for supporting Money in the Morning. Get Lemonade renter's insurance in seconds by heading to stackingbenjamins.com/lemonade. Zero paperwork and zero brokers. Couldn't be easier or faster. That's stackingbenjamins.com/lemonade. I'm going to tell you my lemonade story here in a minute because it just keeps getting better. Love this company. So glad we asked them to help out the show. stackingbenjamins.com/lemonade for more. All right. Speaking of more, we got a big show and lots more. So, Laura, why don't you kick off this party for us?
And now, your first Money in the Morning headline.
Thank you very much, Laura. First headline comes to us from USA Today, but you're either reading about this or living this no matter where you live. This is written by Steve Kiggins. Hurricane Florence, what we know on Friday. We're recording this on Friday, going out, of course, Saturday morning. Plotting Hurricane Florence made landfall Friday morning near Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. As of 11 a.m., Florence was 20 miles southwest of Wilmington, North Carolina, packing sustained hurricane force winds of 80 miles per hour, moving west-southwest at 3 miles per hour, the National Hurricane Center said. Despite being downgraded again the late Thursday night, this time to a Category 1 storm, Florence is projected to bring hurricane force winds and life-threatening storm surge as it makes its way on a southwest trek across the Carolina coast. Florence spent Thursday crawling toward the Carolina coast at 5 to 6 miles per hour, hardly faster than the average person's walking speed of 3.1 miles per hour. I never knew, by the way, the average person walked at 3.1 miles per hour. Did you know that, Richie? Did you know you walk at 3.1? I think Richie's more of a 3.3 guy. You walk a little fast. He's got places to go. But anyway, the storm's relentless rain had already resulted in serious flooding in low-lying areas, and its gusting winds knocked out power for thousands of people in North Carolina. Here's the latest on what the Weather Service has called the storm of a lifetime for the Carolinas. Florence is now ashore. It made landfall at 7:15 a.m. Friday near Wrightsville Beach. It was now 20 miles southwest of Wilmington, North Carolina. The next question was, how much is it going to rain? A lot, and for days. In a video briefing, National Weather Service meteorologist Brandon Locklear said North Carolina could see the equivalent of 8 months of rain in the span of 2 or 3 days. What's the biggest concern? It's the storm surge, or the rising of the sea level that pushes water ashore and leads to flooding. The forecast for Florence includes storm surge up to 11 feet in some areas. During CNN's live coverage Thursday night, storm chaser Mike Scantlin said, water kills more people than every other water phenomenon combined. And I said every other water phenomenon, every other weather phenomenon combined. Let me say that again. Water kills more people than every other weather phenomenon combined. How strong are the winds? Florence had maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour. when it made landfall near Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. According to the latest Friday forecast, the storm is now packing winds of 80 miles per hour. How many people are without power? Extreme winds mean power outages. More than 475,000 customers were without power, mostly in North Carolina, as the eye of Hurricane Florence went ashore near Wilmington and began its slow trek inland and along the coast. For updates, it says go to online ncdps.gov/Florence. Just crazy. It says, and if you're concerned about scams and hoaxes related to Florence, BuzzFeed is keeping a list. Isn't that horrible? People taking advantage of other people's difficulties, their time of need. That's absolutely horrible. Going to say hello early here to our friends in the Facebook group. We do these live on our Facebook page. Head to facebook.com/iStackBenjamins, and you too can be a part of the show. Ryan says Weather Channel Stacking Benjamins edition today. Yes, it is. It felt like that for a second, didn't it? But now let's talk about your money. Let's turn it into what this has to do with your money. Clearly, as we've talked about when there have been other events, your money is the last thing you should be thinking about. What you should be thinking about, if you're on the East Coast, is staying safe, taking care of yourself and your family and the people around you and your pets. I know there's a big horse show going on in North Carolina. A friend of ours, another podcaster, very involved in that community, and huge event going on in North Carolina right now. But take care of the people around you. Take care of the pets around you. And before you left, hopefully you took care of your property. But let's talk about that, because this is a time when we talk about probabilities. I think that when we think about Florence, the first question was, should I stay or should I go, right? Should I stay and ride out the storm, or should I go? I'm talking to one friend of the show, our friend Lori. She was talking about how she was going to stay, and there she is. Lori's in the Lori, I'm outing you. Lori told me she was going to stay, and I thought, are you crazy? Are you nuts? Staying around when there's a hurricane around? Playing that game obviously is an individual decision for everybody. But when it comes to anything related to weather, especially related to water, going back to that statistic, water kills more people than every other weather phenomenon combined. I like thinking in terms of statistics. So the first thing is, I think in terms of my property, when this type of thing happens, how do I make sure that there's a reasonable chance that my property is going to be protected in this? And then I find out how to protect my property, and I do that thing. But I don't cover everything. I cover the highest probability that something bad's going to happen. So what are the things that I really most need to protect? The most expensive things in my house, right? But the bigger thing to protect is yourself. For two reasons. Number one, you only have one life, so take care of that. But number two, assuming that you don't pass away, that you live, still the chance of maybe being disabled. Chance of being disabled is a risk that a lot of people forget about. Or they decide, you know what, I'm a safe skier. I take care of myself. And in this case, we're not worried about you, we're worried about Florence. And so having the right disability coverage, having the right life insurance, having your estate plan the way it should be. These are things, obviously, if you're on the coast of North Carolina right now, not a time to think about it. But for everybody else who's listening to this or watching us live as we record this, those are the things you want to get ready ahead of time. And when you do that, you want to think in probabilities. So what we're going to read in the next few weeks, and I know we're going to have headlines here, are people that didn't protect their stuff. People that lost tons of stuff because they gambled. And we'll talk more in the big idea about gambling. But when you think, you want to think in terms of probabilities. What's the probability that something's going to happen? And you want to insure those bigger risks. And not just insure them with insurance. Because when I say the word insure, the very first thing you think is, well, okay, you're saying to buy insurance. Not necessarily. I mean, you want to look at those risks. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine in Michigan is a structural engineer, works with the highway department. And he said when they engineer highway projects, the very first thing they do before they build is they build out a list of everything that could go wrong. And then they look at the probabilities of all those things that could go wrong. And then in order, they check off how they're going to protect against all those things. And only once they're satisfied that the highest probability things are taken care of and that they have a plan of attack for everything on that list, then, only then do they start building. So it doesn't mean buying insurance. When I say insure against, I actually mean just having a plan. And that's pretty powerful because if you start with insurance, you know what happens? Some insurance agent knocks on your door or calls you up or whatever the case may be. Or you hear that your friend had some type of coverage and you end up buying an insurance policy that you didn't need. Don't start with insurance. Start with what's the risk and the probability and then work out. And once you do that, then decide where insurance fits. And I think that's a much, much better way to handle it. So that's Joe's lesson from piece number 1. Let's say hi again to everybody in the basement. Lori, hopefully you're not getting rained on too hard there in Charleston, South Carolina. Hope you're safe there. And anybody who's listening in North Carolina, man, take care of yourself. That is the first thing. Worried about our friends in North Carolina. Gregory's here. Gregory said, Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said and what you did, but will remember how you made them feel. People getting exploited by other people or businesses are definitely going to remember being price gouged. It's horrible. Even worse than that, just living with yourself, Gregory. Like if I have only, and I'm going to get a little funky spiritual here for a second. If I've got one life to live, why am I going to spend it ripping people off? Like, really? I remember watching this special one time talking about the, quote, robber barons. And sure, there's lots of stuff that Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and Jay Gould, J.P. Morgan did that might not have been on the up and up, but generally speaking, look at the number of jobs they created. Look at the monuments they created. Look at the infrastructure these people created, the things that they did. And I don't call them the robber barons. I call these people always looking for a quick buck, always looking for the quick shortcut that we know doesn't exist. That's what frustrates me. I don't know how those people can sleep. It's very frustrating. Dylan says, you're going to confuse Doug. Water's the source of all life, and now you're telling him it might kill. Wouldn't that be great? Doug swears off water. That's a storyline for the Stacking Benjamin show. Lori says, I'm a Money in the Morning listener, so I'm prepared. It's amazing what you learn in the basement. Lori, you're going to ruin our reputation. You have to stop that. Do not talk about learning anything here. Let's move on to our second piece, which usually we try to make sure the pieces aren't related. Sadly, today they are. And this piece comes to us from Investment News, and it's written by a guy we quote a lot here, Gregor Kirchi. Greg writes, states have taken steps to limit the drastic rate increases plaguing the long-term care insurance market, leading some experts to suggest that these insurance policies are worth a second look for financial advisors and consumers. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a piece about long-term care talking about how these rate increases are just through the roof. We talked about it a lot on Stacking Benjamins. The biggest worry for me in insurances of things going the wrong way is long-term care. Like, I think in most of the retail community, when people look at insurance-type products, everybody's worried about annuities. I think annuities are going the right way. You're seeing a lot of work on annuities. They're not there yet. Annuities are ugly products, by and large, right now. But I'm telling you, the tidal wave, well, that's a bad analogy for today. I apologize for that one. The movement that's happening right now is a movement toward much better annuity products. Long-term care has no idea how they're going to solve this problem. There have been so many more claims, long-term care claims, than these companies originally thought. And the underwriting has been so bad that they're jacking up rates to cover their butt and to make sure they stay in business. So that's where we're at here at the beginning of this piece. So let's continue. So state regulators are fighting back. Greg writes, more than 36 states have adopted rules that seem to have held down the size and frequency of the increases in annual premiums that insurers have sought to impose on many policyholders. Rate increases are one of the big reasons advisors and consumers have shied away from purchasing traditional long-term care policies, which cover nursing home, assisted living, and home health care expenses for older Americans. Rate increases can stick buyers with a higher bill or cause them to lapse their policy if premiums become unaffordable. Rules issued by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners in 2000, which have been adopted in 41 states, require insurers to price newer policies more conservatively to avoid a surprise increase down the road. The standards, which only apply to individual LTC policies sold in a state after it's adopted the rules, appear to have fostered some stabilization among newer policies. The average cumulative rate increase since 2001 on policies covered by the rules is nearly half of that for uncovered policies. 31% on policies covered by the rules versus 55% on policies that aren't covered, according to national data aggregated by the LTC shop, an insurance agency specializing in long-term care insurance. So get this. Your policy went up by 55% if it's an older policy. 55%. If your policy is a younger policy and is covered by these rules enacted just after the turn of the century, you're only having it stuck to you at 31%. Isn't that a bargain? Big bargain. The median increase has also dropped significantly from 20% to 46%. Despite the reduction, the possibility of rate increases continues to make some advisors wary of the product. Others are optimistic about the growing health of the marketplace. Quote, newer policies will be much more stable than older policies from a rate perspective, said Scott Olson, an independent insurance agent. They're working very well, he said, referring to the state rules. Many of the rate increases insurers have imposed are on policies sold in the 1990s when the LTC industry was relatively new, according to experts. The rate adjustments have been necessary for insurers to overcome adverse effects from policy mispricing and overestimation of lapse rates and a decade of rock-bottom insurance rates. A study conducted by Millman, a consulting firm, found that more than 90% of insurers with long-term care business have sought to increase client premiums. Of those, half imposed an average rate increase of 40% or more. Big stuff. So what do you do? What do you do here? I actually don't want to talk a lot here about long-term care. I want to talk about this. OG and I often talk about regulators and regulation, and as we should, we roll our eyes. But sometimes regulators get it right. And I don't know what the percentage is. But when people come to me and they say, listen, we got to get rid of all the regulators, I'll point to stuff like this. Because in this particular case, regulation saved a lot of people's bacon. And maybe they weren't able to save everybody's bacon. But certainly when you look at that drastic difference between people being screwed to the rate of 55% versus 31%, while that still doesn't mean great stuff for the long-term care industry, and I still question what's going to happen with long-term care down the road, certainly the main reason for that you can point to is the change in regulation. I was working in the industry at that time. You saw this. People with older policies just getting hammered. And the bad reason they were getting hammered is because their policies were priced too low. And instead, after the year 2000, trying to talk to somebody about long-term care and telling them what the price was, they'd have sticker shock right away. Are you kidding me? I got to pay how much money? When I first started talking to people about long-term care in 1994, 1995, it wasn't that big a deal. And you know what? We were talking then about how companies had never raised rates on people. Companies like Genworth, some big name companies never raised rates on anybody, and yet it got pretty ugly after 2000. So regulations have a place. Not always, my friend. I'd say more than not, I roll my eyes and I go, you know what? This law is going to have unintended consequences. Sure enough, we talk about that a lot, don't we? In this case, long-term care's got a long way to go, kids. But I think in this case, regulators actually helping this this insurance industry, long-term care insurance, get it together. All right, let's go back and say hello again to our friends on the Facebook page. Dylan says, all about saving. All about saving. I don't know, is that a carrot? What the heck is the... Dylan has some emoji on here, and my screen is about this tall where I can see it. And it's okay. I just said an audio podcast this tall. That's when you know that we're doing this live, because I caught a fish this big. That's great for audio. Lori says, just finished The Power of Zero by David McKnight. He suggests long-term insurance retirement plans with a long-term care provision. Your thoughts? I like coupling those two products together because of the fact that they work well together and one can help with the other. You actually get, so let me back up the bus for a second. When you buy insurance, there's two different components to the insurance, Lori. Component number one is a policy cost. So there is a certain cost, an administrative cost, to put that policy into action and to keep that policy working. And then under that, for life insurance as an example, they're going to look at how old you are, how healthy you are, and they're going to do this rate called cost per thousand, which means every $1,000 of insurance is going to have a price. And if you're 25, that price per thousand is going to be pretty low. As you get older, it's going to get higher. But there's two components. There's the price for the insurance and how many thousands you buy. And then there is the actual policy cost. When you combine two policies as one, there's a good chance that you're going to eliminate a lot of costs just because you put the two things together. So now instead, you're only going to have one policy cost, and then you'll also have the expectation that you're going to use the policy calculated by underwriters. So, and while they're doing underwriting on one for insurance, if they're likely to take you for insurance that you're going to live a long time, maybe they think that you're going to be healthy for a long time, maybe they think that you're going to avoid a long-term care stay. So there's also some benefits there to having those together. So the chance that that's going to be a cheaper, a less expensive price tag is better. Then, of course, any cost that you have in a long-term care facility or having long-term care help, your family or beneficiaries can be reimbursed through the life insurance policy. Convoluted a little bit, but putting them together, I think for the right person can make a bunch of sense. Dylan says that thing I was looking at was bacon. It is bacon. So all about saving your bacon. Yes. Amen, brother. Insurance companies need to save their bacon. John is here. Hey, John. John says, I'm sure it's tough for insurance companies when it comes to long-term care. Trying to price it so it doesn't send people running has to be hard. You know what the harder part is, John? The harder part is for them not to lose their butt because so many people are using it. And that should send a beacon off in all our heads. Like whether we use insurance or not, looking at this issue, we have to look at it. Because the reason these companies are jacking up the rates is because they're going out of business. So many companies have left that field. Interesting stuff. But yeah, imagine being a long-term care insurance company. To your point, John, bam, other John, who counts the number of times we say to your point. Long-term care policies so incredibly expensive, and I can't imagine being somebody selling those insurance policies. Hey, guess what's going to cost your arm and your leg? What do you think? You want to buy two? Yeah, probably not. In just a second, we're going to transition over to what we call the big idea. Big idea takes these two together, and today's idea is actually much, much smaller than what we usually talk about. But first, I want to talk about my experience with Lemonade, because first, nobody loves their insurance company when it comes to their homeowner's company. You high-fiving yourself and giving your insurance agent a hug when it comes to your insurance company for your homeowners or your renter's insurance? Probably not. You fill out endless forms, maybe send a fax. What the heck's that? And when you need them most, then they hike up your rate. Well, Lemonade's different. Powered by artificial intelligence and behavioral economics, Lemonade's replaced brokers with bots and paperwork with algorithms. And what does that mean? It means you get a policy in seconds starting at $5 a month. Best part, choose a charity to support, and Lemonade will donate your leftover premium money to the cause once a year. From a necessary evil into a social good, who knew insurance could be so fun? Head to stackyourbenjamins.com/lemonade to get a quote in 90 seconds. So I did this. I ended up saving well over $900. Mine wasn't $5, by the way. And it's a 4-room apartment over a garage. So your experience, where you're at, now this is a kind of an old place that we live in, and they tell you exactly what affects your rate, and the fact that this is an old building that we're in, an old garage next to an old, beautiful house, right out this window right here. The price was higher for us. But when I went to another company, a brick and mortar company in town, tons higher. Lots and lots and lots more dollars. And when I say lots more dollars, over double the price. Like I cut my rate in half by going through Lemonade. And when they say 90 seconds, it was totally 90 seconds. Now, we needed a jewelry rider on the policy. They did the initial policy, but since we talked last, we've added the jewelry rider, and it was super simple. I did the app download they talked about. I took pictures of the appraisal of the jewelry, sent that in, boom, done. Super easy. Easiest insurance transaction I've ever had. StackyBenjamins.com/lemonade for more on them. And if you use our link, by the way, that's the way that they support the show. So thanks for people. If you are going to try Lemonade, please use our link because that keeps Money in the Morning operating. That's it. And Kurt says, when life gives you lemons, get lemonade. Kurt must be in advertising. So Kurt's brilliance when it comes to words. I should add that to the script. I'm going to call Jason at Lemonade and tell him to add Kurt's stuff. Kurt, we'll see if we can get you a little commission for that one. So let's talk about the big idea here, guys. Number one, we talked about Hurricane Florence and about probability management. And life is about probability management. And then, as if we didn't need enough of that, we needed a little more, we then talked about long-term care and how long-term care companies having trouble with probability management, but state regulators stepping up and actually making things much better since 2000. Higher price tag up front, sure, for newer policies, but also because companies are already jacking up the rate. When you first apply for insurance, they're then much less likely to jack up the rate a lot later, making companies act a little more conservatively instead of, and here's a reason why, by the way. Companies go in and they offer a really low rate to grab as much market share as possible, and then they jack up the rate once they have market share. It's a tactic they use quite often, and state regulators go, nope, especially in long-term care where it's so expensive. Don't want to do that. So we take these two and we put these together. What do we got? And I think our big idea today isn't really that big. When it comes to the shadows that I talked about at the beginning of the show, and they're going to come in everybody's life, whether you're in North Carolina right now or whatever happens, at some point the shadows are going to come in your life. Statistics then matter. And if you take care of those high probability risks and hope for the best with low probability risk and don't cut corners, you're going to do a much better job. And you need to think in terms of bets. Annie Duke, the former poker player, was on our Stacky Benjamins podcast a few months ago. And when she came on, her name of her book is called Think in Bets. And I agree with this. And not, by the way, bet in the way my co-host OG does when he on Stacky Benjamins. He'll take a flyer on some bet, and that's just fun with sandbox money, just getting crazy. I'm talking about really seriously betting, because if you're a bad gambler, what do you do on a bet? You do these long shots, right? And you do these things that are, hey, I'm going to either win big or I'm going to lose big. I'm not talking about that type of betting. I'm talking about thinking in terms of, if I were betting big money on this, and think about what you're betting. With life insurance, you're betting your life. Disability insurance, you're betting whether you're going to have an accident that disables you. But think about your life in terms of probabilities. And you can even do this on the other side with your career, with your investments. Like over a 10-year period, what is the highest probability getting me to my goals? Stocks and real estate. Your checking account where you feel safe, low probability of getting you to your goals. Why? Because the thing doesn't grow. Over a 1-year period, a savings account, much better probability of reaching your goal than real estate or your stock portfolio. stocks go up and down too much. Most real estate has fairly high transaction costs. Hard also to get out of. You can't just rip off your bathroom if you need, a few extra bucks. Just sell that one little piece of the house. Can't do it. So looking at time frames, probabilities, that's the big idea. And I think we're going to leave it right there together. All right, guys, if you're in North Carolina and the area where Florence is headed or Florence is at, please stay safe. We're thinking about you. Everybody else, take care.
Money in the Morning is created by Joe Saul-Sehy and comes to your ears because of the collective genius of our producer, Richie Rutter-Reese, engineer, Caden Thompson, and a pack of very well-trained ferrets here in the basement. You'll find links to all of our headlines featured on today's show in Joe's Twitter feed at @AverageJoeMoney. I know you already know this too, but Money in the Morning is for entertainment purposes only. You shouldn't act on anything recommended by a bunch of entertainers in a basement without first consulting with your financial advisor and second, having your head examined. Have a headline you'd like us to discuss? Send them to Joe at StackingBenjamins.com or put them on our Stacking Benjamins Basement closed Facebook group. This show is copyright 2018 Stacking Benjamins LLC, all rights reserved. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor Doug, and I reserve the right to always say, we'll see you next time back here on Money in the Morning.